She woke up every morning before the sun rose. Not because anyone asked her to, but because that's what it means to be truly dedicated to someone. You give before they even know they need it. Leah Rivera was not supposed to matter in that house. She was the help, the hired hand. The woman who changed the sheets, administered the medications, and kept her eyes down when the lady of the house walked past. She was supposed to be invisible. And for a while, she was. But here's the thing about being invisible. The people who pretend not to see you are often the ones being watched most closely by someone else. And in a mansion full of secrets, locked doors, and a marriage built on lies, there was one man who saw Leah Rivera every single day. He couldn't say it, he couldn't show it. But he saw her kindness when his wife showed her cruelty. He saw her patience when everyone else had already given up. He saw her. And the day he finally found his voice, everything in that house was about to change forever. This is a story about what happens when the wrong people have all the power. About a woman who had nothing and gave everything anyway. About a man who was written off by the world, but was never as broken as they wanted him to be. And about a wife, oh, this wife who thought she had won. She had not won. Stay with me today, because this story has more twists than you will see coming, and I promise you, the ending is worth every single minute. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Leah Rivera was 24 years old and already acquainted with the kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. She had been working since she was 16. Grocery stores, cleaning services, hospital aid, shifts, anything that kept the lights on and her younger brother in school. She was not unlucky, exactly. She was just the kind of person the world assumes will be fine. Because she always had been fine. Because she never complained. Because she showed up. People like Leah Rivera have a way of becoming invisible to everyone, except the people who need them most. When the caregiving agency called her about the Chavez household, the coordinator on the phone hesitated before she finished reading the listing. "I want to be upfront with you," she said. "This is a beautiful home. The compensation is excellent. But the last 3 caregivers didn't complete their contracts." "Why not?" Leah asked. A pause. "The household can be challenging." Leah asked what that meant. The coordinator said the word she'd been carefully avoiding. "The wife." Leah almost said no. She sat with the phone in her hand for a long moment, thinking about her rent, thinking about her brother's tuition, thinking about the number in her bank account that seemed to shrink every time she looked at it. Then she said yes. The address they gave her was in the kind of neighborhood she had only ever driven through on her way to somewhere else. Wide streets, perfect trees, the kind of quiet that costs money to maintain. The Chavez estate sat at the end of a long private drive, behind iron gates that opened with a slow, deliberate confidence. The way doors open when they know you are already impressed before you get inside. And Leah was impressed. She didn't let it show. She had learned long ago that showing people you want something gives them power over you. A housekeeper named Gloria met her at the door, 50s. Kind eyes, the practiced stillness of a woman who had learned to say a great deal with very little expression. "Welcome," Gloria said softly, taking Leah's bag before she could protest. "I'll show you to your room. Mrs. Chavez will see you at noon." "Mr. Chavez," she paused. "Mr. Chavez is having a difficult morning." "That's all right," Leah said. "I'm used to difficult." Gloria looked at her then, really looked at her, with an expression that was half relief and half something that looked almost like sorrow. "I hope so, dear," she said quietly, and she led Leah inside. The room they had prepared for her was small, not unpleasant, clean, well-lit, a decent bed, a window that faced the garden, but noticeably, deliberately modest compared to the rest of the home. As if someone had wanted to ensure that whoever slept in it never forgot their place in the household hierarchy. On the pillow, there was a single sheet of paper, household staff expectations. Please read before beginning your assignment. Staff were to address Mrs. Chavez as Mom. Staff were not to initiate conversation with Mrs. Chavez unless spoken to first. Staff were not to enter the east wing of the house without express permission. Staff were to take meals in the kitchen, not the dining room. not the sitting room. Staff were expected to be unobtrusive at all times. At the bottom, in slightly different font, as though added later, almost as an afterthought, Mr. Chavez's care schedule will be provided separately. Please be advised that Mr. Chavez does not currently communicate verbally. All communication will be through written note or gesture. Caregiver is expected to adapt accordingly. Leah read that last part twice. Nobody had mentioned that. She folded the paper carefully, and she told herself what she always told herself when things turned out harder than expected. You've handled harder. Keep going. She met Reed Chavez that afternoon. He was in the sunroom, a large, light-filled space off the back of the house that faced the garden, clearly designed for someone who could no longer easily go outside but still needed to feel the sky. He sat in a wheelchair positioned directly in front of the largest window, his back to the door, completely still. He was broader than she expected, taller, even sitting. He had the frame of a man who had once been very physically powerful, and the stillness of a man who had made a decision, somewhere along the way, to stop fighting. Leah walked around so she was in his line of sight, rather than announcing herself from behind. It was something her first supervisor had taught her years ago. Never startle someone who is already fragile. Always let them see you coming. Reed Chavez watched her move around to face him without any change in expression. She smiled at him. Not the big, performative smile that some caregivers used, the one that said, I feel sorry for you, and I need you to know I'm a good person. Just a small, genuine, I see you, and I'm not afraid of this smile. Mr. Chavez, she said, I'm Leah. I'll be taking care of you. He said nothing. He had been told he wouldn't, but he held her gaze. And after a moment, very slightly, he nodded. It was the smallest thing. It was also the first honest communication she had witnessed in that house. She pulled a chair over and sat down beside him. Not across from him, the way you sit when you're assessing someone, but beside him, the way you sit when you're keeping someone company. You don't have to talk, she said. I talk enough for two people. You just let me know if you need anything. She reached into her bag and pulled out the worn, paperback novel she brought everywhere. A habit from childhood she'd never outgrown. And she opened it and began to read quietly to herself. She wasn't reading to him. She wasn't performing companionship. She was simply being present without demanding anything from him in return. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. Then she felt it. The almost imperceptible shift of his attention. The way the quality of his stillness changed from closed off to something more like listening. She kept reading. She didn't acknowledge it. She didn't make it a moment. But she filed it away carefully. He was in there, all of him. Just locked behind something she hadn't identified yet. She was going to find the key. Veronica Chavez arrived home at 6 o'clock that evening, like a weather system. The atmosphere of the house changed before she even came through the door. Leah noticed it first, in the kitchen, where Gloria and the other staff member, a young man named Daniel, both straightened slightly and became very busy with things that hadn't seemed urgent moments before. Then the front door opened. The clicking of heels on marble was slow and deliberate, the kind of walk that knows it's being listened into. Veronica Chavez was, objectively, a stunning woman. Late 30s, dark hair swept back with the kind of effortless precision that takes a great deal of effort. Dressed in a cream blazer and tailored trousers that cost more than Leah's monthly rent. Skin that glowed with the particular radiance of someone whose skincare budget was a line item. She swept into the kitchen where Leah was reviewing Reed's medication chart, looked at her the way you look at a new piece of furniture that hasn't been placed correctly yet, and smiled. You must be the new girl, she said. Not the new caregiver. Not Leah, the new girl. Leah Rivera, Leah said, extending her hand. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Chavez. Veronica looked at the extended hand for just a second, too long before shaking it. Brief, limp, dismissive. How was he today? She asked, already turning toward the refrigerator, making clear that the answer was not something she needed to look at Leah for. He was calm, Leah said. We spent some time in the sunroom. I reviewed his medication schedule, and I'd like to discuss a few. His previous caregiver managed the medication schedule just fine, Veronica said pleasantly, pouring herself a glass of sparkling water. I'm sure she did, Leah said, keeping her voice even. I just noticed a small discrepancy I wanted to flag with you or with his physician. The glass paused on the way to Veronica's lips. Just briefly. What kind of discrepancy? The dosage on one of his bottles doesn't match the documented prescription. It's probably a simple recording error, but I like to verify everything at the start of an assignment. Veronica set the glass down, turned to face Leah fully for the first time. The smile was still there, but something behind it had shifted. That's very thorough of you, she said. I'll look into it. I can contact his physician directly if that would be easier. Leah offered. That won't be necessary. Still pleasant, absolutely firm. I manage my husband's medical care personally. I'll look into it and let you know. She picked up her water glass and walked out of the kitchen. The room felt different once she was gone. Lighter, somehow, less pressurized. Leah looked at Gloria, who was very deliberately not making eye contact with anyone. Does she always manage his medical appointments herself? Leah asked quietly. Gloria kept her eyes on the counter she was wiping. Mrs. Chavez manages everything, she said. And then, even more quietly, so low Leah almost missed it. Everything. That night, Leah lay in her small room and stared at the ceiling and thought about the medication discrepancy. It was small. It could genuinely be a recording error. These things happened. Paperwork got confused, bottles got mislabeled, information didn't transfer cleanly between providers. But the way Veronica's glass had paused, that half second of stillness, that was not the reaction of a woman who was unconcerned about a clerical error. Leah reached for the notebook she kept in her bag, the same notebook she'd carried through every assignment, where she logged observations too small to put in an official chart, but too significant to ignore. Her supervisor at her first hospital job had taught her this. The things that don't quite fit, the woman had said, are the things that matter most. Write them down. You'll know why later. Leah wrote down the dosage discrepancy, the paused glass, the way Veronica had shut down the offer to contact the physician, the printed rules on the pillow that spoke less of a household running smoothly and more of a household being tightly controlled. Then she wrote something else. He's not what they say he is. She underlined it, clicked the pen closed, turned off the light. In the dark, she listened to the sounds of the house, the particular creaks and sighs of old stone and wood, and she thought about the way Reed Chavez had shifted his attention toward her without moving. The way he had nodded, the way his eyes, when they finally met hers, had been so completely, heartbreakingly awake. She thought about the note in his file. Does not currently communicate verbally. Currently. Such a careful word, such a deliberately temporary word. A week passed, then two. The household found its rhythm around Leah the way water finds its way around a new stone in a stream. Adjusting, incorporating, continuing. She and Reed developed a language of their own, the way caregivers and patients often do when words aren't available. A raised eyebrow for yes, a slow blink for no, a slight tilt of the head for I don't know or maybe, or I don't want to talk about that right now. She learned which silences were peaceful and which were the kind that pressed down on him from the inside. She learned that he liked the window open in the morning regardless of temperature, and that he couldn't tolerate strong scents, and that when he was frustrated, his left hand would close slowly into a fist and open again, close and open, like something trying to release pressure. She learned that he watched everything, every interaction between the staff, every phone call Veronica took in the hallway, every delivery at the front door, every visitor who came and went. He watched it all from his chair, from his window, with those completely awake eyes. And Leah began to understand that the silence, every vacancy, was actually something else entirely. It was documentation. Reed Chavez was watching his own house the way a detective watches a crime scene. He was waiting. Leah didn't know what he was waiting for yet. But she was beginning to understand that she had walked into something much larger than a caregiving assignment. The first time Veronica humiliated her in front of others, Leah almost missed what it revealed. There was a dinner, a small gathering of what appeared to be close friends of Veronica's, four women who arrived in expensive cars and kissed each other's cheeks with the practiced warmth of people who competed with each other constantly and called it friendship. Leah had been asked, instructed, really, to bring Reed down to the dining room for the evening. She had dressed him carefully. He had, she noticed, made no objection to this. Usually he had preferences about what he wore, specific colors he favored, but tonight he had been passive about all of it, watching the door, waiting for something. When Leah wheeled him into the dining room, Veronica was holding court at the head of the table, laughing at something one of her friends had said. Her whole face lit up with the version of herself she showed the world. She looked up when they entered. "Oh, good," she said to her guests with a light, performative sigh. "The nurse is here, not the caregiver, not Leah. The nurse. Said the way you'd say the repairman is here." The package arrived. "Can we get him settled and then have you eat in the kitchen?" Veronica said to Leah, smiling. "The adults are having dinner tonight." One of the guests laughed softly. The others had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. Leah kept her expression completely neutral. "Of course," she said quietly. "I'll make sure Mr. Chavez has everything he needs first." She went through the careful process of locking Reed's wheelchair at the table, adjusting his positioning, making sure he had water, checking that his medication timing would still work around the dinner hour. She did it thoroughly and without hurry, even as she felt Veronica's impatience like a low-grade heat from across the table. And when she straightened up to leave, she looked at Reed, just briefly, to check in the way she always did before stepping away. He was looking directly at her. His expression hadn't changed, but his left hand, resting on the arm of his chair, moved just slightly, the smallest possible gesture. A thumb raised, then lowered. "I see you. You're doing fine. Don't let her take anything from you." It was such a small thing. It was also the kindest thing anyone in that house had done for her. Leah walked to the kitchen, sat down at the small table where Gloria was quietly eating alone, and spent the next 40 minutes being completely, stubbornly fine. But something had shifted. She had come into this assignment, thinking she was here to help Reed recover. She was beginning to understand that recovery was the least of what was happening in this house. The medication discrepancy she had flagged had never been addressed. Not officially. Veronica had told her, 3 days after their kitchen conversation, that she had spoken with the physician and it had been a duplication issue, now corrected. She had not shown Leah the corrected documentation. She had not offered to connect Leah with the physician directly. Leah had written it down in her notebook and kept watching. She noticed that Reed's prescribed physical therapy, exercises he had been doing consistently in the weeks before Veronica's return from a business trip, had been quietly halted. Veronica had told Leah with that same pleasant irresistibility that the physician had recommended rest over exertion. Leah had asked to see the recommendation in writing. Veronica had smiled the sly smile that meant the conversation was over. "I'll have it sent to you," she said. It never arrived. Leah wrote it down. She noticed that Reed's brother, a man named Marco, whose name she had found in the emergency contacts file, had apparently called the house 3 times in the past month. Gloria had mentioned it in passing, not realizing how significant the information was. All 3 calls had gone through Veronica. None of them had reached Reed. Leah wrote it down. She noticed that the east wing of the house, the wing staff were forbidden from entering, had a room that was accessed by Veronica sometimes after midnight. Leah had been awake one night with a stomachache and had heard the footsteps in the hallway, the soft but unmistakable click of that particular door. She'd wrote it down. The notebook was filling up. It was Gloria who finally said something. She came to Leah's room on a Sunday evening, off the clock, when the house was quiet and Veronica was out. She knocked softly. The way you knock, when you're not sure you should be knocking at all. Leah opened the door and knew immediately from the older woman's face that this was a conversation that had been building for a long time. "Sit down," Leah said gently, moving her bag off the single chair. Gloria sat. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked at them for a moment before she spoke. "I've been in this house for 9 years," she said. "Before the accident, before everything changed." Leah waited. "He was different before," Gloria said. "Mr. Chavez, he was loud, happy, always moving. He built his company himself, you know, from absolutely nothing. He was proud of that. He was a good man. What happened? Leah asked. With the accident, Gloria's folded hands pressed together more tightly. They said it was ice on the road, she said. They said he lost control. But you don't think so. A long pause. I think, Gloria said very carefully, that there are things in this house that were decided before that accident. And I think the accident was very convenient for some of those decisions. The room was very quiet. I'm not saying anything, Gloria added quickly. I'm not accusing. I have no proof of anything, and I am not a person who speaks without proof. I understand, Leah said. I'm just saying, Gloria continued, that you are the first person in this house in 14 months who has looked at Mr. Chavez the way a person looks at another person. And I think he knows that. And I think... She stopped, started again. I think you should be careful. The ones who last 3 weeks and leave, they leave because they're scared. Or because they're offered money to go quietly. You've been here almost a month, and she hasn't managed to push you out yet. And I think that frightens her. Why does it frighten her? Gloria stood up, smoothed her apron with both hands. The movement of a woman closing a door on something she'd opened further than she intended. Because you're paying attention, she said simply. She left. Leah sat alone in her small room for a long time. Then she opened her notebook, and she started writing down everything she knew, and everything she suspected, and every small broken thread she had been collecting since the day she walked through those iron gates. When she was done, she read it back to herself, and the picture it made was not the picture of a man recovering from an accident. It was the picture of a man being kept. She started testing it carefully the next morning. She began by finding ways to spend more time with Reed that fell technically within her care duties but created more opportunity for private communication. Longer morning routines. Extended time in the sunroom framed as therapeutic environment exposure. Medication reviews that she conducted at his side rather than from across the room. Veronica was often out in the mornings. This was when the house breathed differently. One morning, 10 days after Gloria's visit, Leah sat beside Reed at the sunroom's window, with her notebook open, ostensibly reviewing his care notes. She had written something on a blank page and she tilted it toward him without drawing attention to the gesture. She had written, "Do you want me to contact your brother?" She watched his face. For a moment, nothing. Then his jaw tightened. His throat moved. His left hand on the arm of the chair closed slowly into a fist. And then he did something she hadn't seen him do before. He turned his head and looked directly at her. Not the sideways watching he usually did. Not the oblique, careful surveillance. He turned and faced her fully. And his eyes, those completely awake, completely trapped eyes, filled slowly with something that was not quite tears and not quite relief, but lived somewhere between the two. He nodded. Not the small, barely there nod of their daily communication. A full, deliberate, unambiguous yes. Leah closed the notebook. Okay, she said quietly. Just that, just okay. Outside, a bird was singing in the garden. The morning light was doing something gold and gentle through the glass. For the first time since she had arrived, the sunroom felt like a room where something was beginning rather than a room where something had ended. Getting word to Marco Chavez was not simple. Leah's personal phone was her own. Veronica had no claim over it. But she was aware that in a house this tightly controlled, the risk of discovery was real. She didn't use the house Wi-Fi. She drove to a coffee shop on her day off, a Tuesday, and she found Marco Chavez through a business search. He ran a contracting firm. His contact information was publicly listed, and she called from her own phone in a corner booth with a cup of coffee she barely touched. He answered on the second ring. Marco Chavez, Mr. Chavez, Leah said, "My name is Leah Rivera. I'm your brother's caregiver at the family home. I need to speak with you about Reed." A silence that was nothing like the silences in that house. This silence was the silence of someone who had been waiting for a phone call for a very long time. "Is he all right?" Marco asked. His voice was controlled, but only just. "He's physically stable," Leah said carefully. "But there are things happening in that household that I think you need to be aware of. I want to be very clear that I'm calling you as his caregiver, out of concern for his well-being, and that I'm doing this on my own time without the knowledge of Mrs. Chavez." Another silence. "How long have you been there?" Marco asked. Almost 5 weeks. The others left by week 3. I know. Why are you still there? Leah looked out the coffee shop window at the ordinary street outside, people walking dogs, a child on a bicycle, the uncomplicated sunlight of a Tuesday morning. Because he's in there, she said. All of him. And I don't think anyone has been paying attention to that. She heard Marco Chavez exhale, a long, slow breath, on the other end of the line. Tell me everything, he said. She told him about the medication discrepancy, about the halted physical therapy, about the blocked calls, about the East Wing, about the printed rules and the way the staff moved and the way Veronica controlled every piece of information that moved in and out of that house. Marco listened without interrupting. When she finished, there was a pause. I've been trying to get to him for 14 months, he said. Every time I called, she said he was resting, or he wasn't well enough for visitors, or the doctor had advised against stimulation. I hired a lawyer 5 months ago to look into his legal situation, his power of attorney, his financial accounts, and the lawyer hit walls everywhere he turned. She has power of attorney? Leah asked. Granted during his hospitalization, Marco said. When he was unconscious, immediately post-accident, before anyone in the family could be contacted. The coffee cup in Lisa's hand was cold. She hadn't drunk any of it. Marco, she said carefully, I'm not in a position to make accusations. I don't have enough to take anywhere official yet. But I'm keeping records and I'm paying attention, and I think Reed is trying to communicate something. I think he has been for a long time, and no one has been listening in the right way. What do you need from me? Marco asked immediately. I need to know that there's someone on the outside who knows what I know, Leah said. And I need to know that if something happens, if she finds a reason to let me go, someone will keep pushing. I'll do more than that, Marco said. I'm going to get him out of there. Not yet, Leah said. Not like that. If she thinks anyone is closing in, she'll move him, and we'll lose whatever progress we've made. Let me keep working. Let me get more. A pause. You're very calm for someone sitting in the middle of something like this, Marco said. I'm not calm, Leah said honestly. I'm scared and I'm angry and I'm drinking very bad coffee, but I'm not leaving. She drove back to the house. She parked in the staff area. She sat in her car for a moment, gathering herself, becoming once again the woman who kept her eyes calm and her voice measured and her expression carefully neutral. Then she went inside. Veronica was in the front sitting room, on the phone, laughing at something. The laugh she used for people she needed something from. She glanced at Leah as she passed and gave a small, dismissive wave. Leah nodded and kept walking. She went to the sunroom. Reed was there. He always seemed to know when she was coming. Would orient himself toward the door a few minutes before she appeared, the way people do when they've learned someone's footsteps. She sat down beside him. She didn't say anything for a moment, just settled in the way she always did. Then she said quietly, I talked to your brother. His hand went still on the arm of the chair. He loves you very much, she said. He's been trying to reach you. She watched his face change. Watched the careful stillness crack, just for a moment, into something raw and real and deeply, achingly human. His hand came off the arm of the chair. He reached out, and he put his hand over hers where it rested on her knee. He didn't look at her. He stared at the window, at the garden, at the ordinary beautiful morning outside the glass. His jaw was tight. His throat was moving. But his hand stayed on hers. They sat like that for a long time. Outside, the bird was still singing. Things began to move faster after that. Leah wasn't sure if it was because she was looking more closely, or because the house itself was accelerating towards something. Some conclusion it had been building to for longer than she had been there. She found the first document by accident. She had been asked, by Veronica, with the customary pleasantness, to retrieve a specific medical file from the study off the east hallway. Not the East Wing, which remained forbidden, but the study adjacent to it, which was usually kept locked, and which Veronica had unlocked herself that morning. The blue folder, top shelf, left side, Veronica had said. Don't touch anything else. Leah had found the blue folder, and in pulling it from the shelf, she had dislodged the folder behind it. A plain manila one, unlabeled, which had fallen open on the floor. She had picked it up, and she had seen the top page. It was a financial document. She was not a financial expert, but she understood enough. Her father had run a small business before he died. She had helped him with his books as a teenager. To recognize what she was looking at, it was a transfer document, a large one. From a corporate account she recognized as Reed's company. She had seen the letterhead in his personal files. To an account she didn't recognize. The transfer date was 2 weeks after the accident. The signature at the bottom was Reed's, or someone doing a very convincing version of it. Leah took a photograph with her phone. She replaced the document in the Manila folder, replaced the folder on the shelf, took the blue folder to Veronica, and spent the rest of the morning being completely, carefully, professionally ordinary. That evening, she sent the photograph to Marco. His response came within the hour. That account belongs to a holding company. The holding company belongs to her. My lawyer has been looking for this for 5 months. The walls were closing in, but not around Leah. Around Veronica, Marco's lawyer, armed now with something concrete, moved quickly. A formal petition for review of the power of attorney was filed, the grounds being potential financial misconduct during a period of the patient's incapacitation. A court date was set. A medical review was requested, with an independent physician appointed to assess Reed's current cognitive and communicative capacity. Veronica didn't know any of this yet, but she seemed to feel the weather changing. She became sharper, more present in the house, more watchful of Leah, though she was careful about it. Careful not to seem watchful, which Leah recognized immediately as someone who had spent a great deal of time managing their own behavior. The small cruelties increased. "The way you've arranged his schedule is inefficient," she told Leah in front of Gloria, holding out the printed chart with 2 fingers as though it smelled bad. "I've made corrections." Leah looked at the corrections. Veronica had moved Reed's physical therapy window, the one that had been slowly reinstated over the previous weeks, to a time that conflicted directly with his afternoon rest period, the one time of day when his pain levels were most manageable. "The timing creates a conflict with his pain cycle," Leah said. "I didn't ask for your analysis," Veronica said pleasantly. "I asked you to follow the updated schedule." Leah followed the updated schedule and documented every consequence. The increased pain indicators, the disrupted rest, the measurable regression in his mobility progress. She documented it all in her notebook, and she sent copies to Marco and to the independent physician who had been appointed to review Reed's case. She was building a record. She was doing it quietly, methodically, with the patience of someone who had grown up understanding that the only way to fight power is with precision. The night everything came apart, it was raining. Leah was in Reed's room. She had begun doing a final check each evening, a routine that had evolved naturally from his care needs. When they heard Veronica on the phone in the hallway outside, she was not using her careful, pleasant voice. She was using a voice Leah had never heard before, low, urgent, stripped of all the performance. The voice underneath the voice. "I need more time," she was saying. "The court date is in 3 weeks. I just need—" "No, you don't understand what's at stake here if the physician assessment goes through." She stopped. Footsteps. She was moving away down the hall. But not before Leah had heard enough. She looked at Reed. He was already looking at her. His left hand was closing and opening, the pressure release gesture she had learned in the first weeks. But his face, was doing something different. It was doing something that looked terribly like relief. Like a man who has been holding a breath for 14 months and can finally feel it ending. "It's almost over," Leah said quietly. She wasn't sure she was telling him or herself, maybe both. The independent physician's assessment took place on a Tuesday morning that felt like the longest morning Leah had ever lived through. The physician, a quiet, thorough woman named Dr. Okafor, arrived at 9 and spent 3 hours with Reed in the sunroom while Leah waited in the kitchen, and Veronica paced the front sitting room in a contained, elegant fury. At noon, Dr. Okafor came to find Leah. "How long have you been his caregiver?" she asked. "Almost 3 months," Leah said. Dr. Okafor looked at her for a long moment, professional, assessing. Then something shifted slightly in her expression. You developed the nonverbal communication system he's using? She asked. We developed it together, Leah said. Dr. Okafor nodded slowly. His cognition is entirely intact, she said carefully. The communication difficulties appear to be trauma-related, consistent with selective mutism following severe psychological stress rather than any neurological damage from the accident. With appropriate therapeutic support, I would expect significant recovery. Leah's hands were perfectly still in her lap. He's been capable of communicating the whole time, she said. It was not quite question. He has been communicating, Dr. Okafor said quietly. It seems not everyone was listening. The legal process that followed was not cinematic. It was paperwork and appointments and waiting and more paperwork. It was Marco arriving at the house for the first time in 14 months. Leah watched from the hallway as the two brothers saw each other, watched Reed's face do the thing it had done the day she told him she'd spoken to Marco, watched Marco grip his brother's shoulder and say something low and private that she deliberately didn't try to hear. It was Veronica, served with the legal documents, becoming briefly and terrifyingly still in the front hallway, before walking upstairs with her spine completely straight and her face completely controlled, every inch of her refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of watching her break. It was the financial investigators, and the revised medical records, and the gradual, irrefutable assembly of a picture that showed what had been done in that house over 14 months. It was slow. It was unglamorous. It was the unsexy, necessary machinery of justice. And through all of it, Leah showed up every morning before the sun rose, not because anyone asked her to, because she was still his caregiver, because he still needed her, because the world had moved to a place where leaving was something she could have done, and didn't. Reed spoke for the first time on a Thursday afternoon in November. It was not dramatic the way these moments are in stories. There was no music. There was no audience. There was just the two of them in the sunroom, the garden outside, holding the last of the autumn light. Leah reading her paperback in the chair beside him. And into the quiet, Reed Chavez said in a voice that was rough from disuse but entirely unmistakably his. Thank you. 2 words. Leah lowered her book. She didn't make it a moment. She didn't gasp or cry, though she could have done both. She looked at him. She gave him the small, genuine smile. The I see you and I'm not afraid smile. You're welcome, she said. And then, because she understood him now, understood that he needed things to be ordinary, needed the world to behave like it wasn't constantly an emergency. She lifted her book again and kept reading. But her hand, resting on her knee, was shaking slightly. And outside the window, in the garden, the last of the autumn roses were catching the light in a way that made everything look, briefly and piercingly, like the very first morning of something new. Months later, after the legal proceedings, after the therapy, after the slow and not process of a man reclaiming his voice and his life and himself, Reed Chavez walked for the first time without assistance. Leah was there for that too. She had stayed, not because her contract required it, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had started something, and she was the kind of woman who finishes what she starts. She watched him take 3 careful steps across the sunroom floor, his jaw tight with effort, his eyes fixed on the window and the garden beyond it. And she did not say anything, did not applaud or perform the moment, just watched with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had always known this was possible. He stopped, turned, looked at her. 3 more, she said. He almost smiled, almost, but she saw it. She always saw the things that other people missed. What happened after that is another story for another day. What matters is this. Leah Rivera came to that house with nothing but a bag and a nursing certificate and the kind of quiet desperation that makes you sign a contract without reading every line. She left it with something she hadn't known she was looking for. Not the love story, though that came too, slowly and honestly, and without performance, the way the real ones always do. Not the justice, though that came also, imperfect and incomplete the way justice always is. She left with the knowledge that paying attention is its own kind of power. That seeing people, really seeing them, when everyone else has decided they aren't worth looking at, is one of the most radical things a person can do. That sometimes the most important thing you can offer someone is simply the willingness to stay. Leah Rivera had stayed, and everything, every single thing, had changed because of it. Music lifts gently, not triumphant, just warm. The kind of ending that feels earned. If you've ever felt invisible, or loved someone who is being overlooked, or simply believe that quiet persistence is its own kind of courage, leave a comment below. Tell me what stayed with you. And if you want to hear the next story, because there is always a next story, make sure you are subscribed. We'll see you in the next one.